My gym partner is single and I'm married. One day he asked me how he should financially prepare for marriage. Stay tuned to hear the advice that I gave him.
1, 2, 3, 4.
This is StewardShift, a show that gives you the tools you need to get the most of your best resources. Your money, your mind, your body, your time.
Welcome back to the StewardShift Show. My name is Troy Solomon Levy and I am your host. Marriage is too big of a step in your life to go into it haphazardly. I've been married for 15 years and trust me, the very last thing you want to do is to start off your marriage on bad financial footing. I've been there. Marriage isn't just a romantic partnership. It's also a legal and a financial partnership. And the more we can learn how to partner together, especially in the financial sense, the greater your finances will be in the long run. So we're going to start off this episode with a passage of scripture, and it's actually one of my favorite that helps to describe marriage, and not just marriage, but how to interact and hold each other accountable as human beings. This is Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, where it says, "And the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." First things first, God is telling human beings that it's not good that we're alone. Now, this doesn't mean that everyone is going to get married or that everyone aspires to marriage. That is not the case. And if you happen to not aspire to marriage or won't get married or whatever the case might be, that's okay. That doesn't mean that you are alone. You also need accountability. You also need help. But especially for married couples, it is virtually impossible to be as efficient, to be as effective, to be at your very best when you're doing things by yourself. You didn't get married, or you don't plan on getting married because you want to do things by yourself. You plan on getting married because you want to help your partner, your spouse, through life and to be at their very best so that you can be at your very best. So that means that husband and wife are at their very best when they're helping each other to thrive. So here's the very first thing that you have to do as you prepare for marriage. And we're going to start big. We're starting hard with this one because this is going to be probably the biggest challenge that you'll experience as a married couple. And I'm going to share my own experience from my own marriage, my own wedding day, and the events surrounding it to illustrate this very first point. Okay, so we were literally 2 days in. Literally, we had a 2-day-old marriage, and Rochelle and I went to Florida for our honeymoon, and we wanted to score some free tickets to Orlando, Universal Studios Orlando. And we had to sit through a 2-hour presentation before we could get those free tickets. You probably already know what's coming, but just bear with me. So as I flipped through the brochure, I didn't really know or really care what the presentation was all about. I told Rochelle, I said, look, we're not here to buy anything. I don't care what they're trying to sell us. Let's just sit through this for 2 hours and we can just get our tickets. And as you could probably guess, we came out at the end of that 2-hour presentation with $10,000 worth of debt because we had bought a timeshare. Now, this is the very first purchase that we had as a married couple. And that very first purchase put us $10,000 into the hole. Like, we're starting off our marriage with debt. And what I need you to do, the first thing I need you to do as you begin your marriage is to discuss with each other how much debt you're coming to the table with. Now, this might seem a bit scary because maybe you don't want your significant other to know how much debt you have, or for them to figure out or to think that you're just in really dire financial straits. Well, let's just kind of pump the brakes here. We don't have to overdo it on this one or overthink it, but you do need to let them know, hey, this is what it is, because you're not just coming to the marriage table by yourself. You're coming with a lot of stuff. Some of those things are good things. Some of those things are not so good things, and that's okay. Your significant other loves you for you, but you do need to let them know what it is. So as you start to have this discussion about debt, the very best thing to do first and foremost is to generate a credit report for yourself. You can generate and print it, come to the table, come to that conversation table with that ready and prepared to talk about it and discuss it. The purpose of doing this is you might think you know how much debt you have. Maybe you have some credit cards in your wallet and you just kind of pull those out and assume that that's all that you have. Or maybe you just kind of memorize or think you have memorized how much student loans or what your car note might be. But it's just best to have it all laid out so that you can see all the numbers. You know exactly what it is. You're not here guesstimating or trying to estimate and explain to your partner what you think it might be. No, these are real numbers, and you can generate those credit reports from each of the three major credit bureaus for free once a year. So that means that you can 3 times a year print a free credit report for yourself. So the next thing you're going to do after you see what everything is, I hope you don't say, look, I don't want to marry you anymore. I know you're not going to do that. And I hope you don't get discouraged. Please don't get discouraged at all. What you have to do is to develop a plan together as to how you're going to attack those debts. Do not let lifestyle creep get the best of you at this point as you begin your marriage, because when you start things out as a married couple and you combine your incomes, you're going to have so much more to work with because you're combining everything. Let's go on and use that great dynamic to serve the needs of attacking your greatest enemy. Now, if you happen to not have a financial plan, click the link below and that'll take you to the Blueprint course, which will help you to develop a plan to eliminate debt, build wealth, and experience financial freedom. Now, the second thing that you absolutely have to do as you prepare for marriage is to create a budget together. Now, I just mentioned that when you combine your income, you're going to have so much more at your disposal because you're no longer one person here and one person over here trying to take care of 2 separate households. But now that you're combining everything, you're going to have the power of, I would dare say, compounding your wealth together. Now, you can plan on reducing those shared expenses. That means that you will not have to pay as much for food because I hope you'll be cooking your meals together. You won't have to pay 2 separate housing bills, whether that's rent or mortgages. You do not have to pay 2 separate utility bills. You do not have to pay 2 separate health insurance premiums. You can now plan on reducing your expenses because now you're developing a budget together. And as those expenses are reduced, make sure that you're putting everything down on paper, whether you're using the app on your phone, whether you're using pen and paper, or whether you're using the good old cash budgeting envelope system. Whatever system you use to budget, make sure you do it together. Now, here's some tips and tools for doing that. You have to make sure you're doing this monthly. You can't just have one conversation at the beginning of your marriage and expect for the rest of your life to be cleared without having to budget or have these conversations ever again. That doesn't make sense. Make sure you're coming together and having a financial conversation at least once a month, and you're discussing where you are. You're discussing what your goals are. You're discussing where you did well last month and where you did not so well last month. Make sure that you're having the conversation because, number 2, communication is key, not just to any marriage survival, but it's key for you to be able to make financial progress in your marriage together. Now, the third thing that you can do to prepare for your marriage financially, and I'm going to illustrate it like this. Did you know that one horse can pull 8,000 pounds of weight? And we would assume that 2 horses together could pull 16,000 pounds of weight. But in fact, 2 horses working together can pull a lot more than that. They can pull up to 24,000 pounds together. What's the difference here? You got one horse, but working together, they can pull almost 3 times the amount that they could pull when one horse is working by itself. Well, the difference is that they are working together. So the third way that you can prepare financially for your marriage is to plan on joining your bank accounts after you say, I do. Now, joining bank accounts, I know that some people do not want or do not like to do that. And this is less about money and more about partnership. If you're going to work together, you got to see what everyone is doing. And this isn't a thing about lack of trust or anything like that. Yes, I do hope you trust your future spouse to be able to make wise decisions, but you do want to be able to work together and know what's what and not give any kind of opportunity for any funny business to happen. So make sure you join your bank accounts. Now, I do not combine joining bank accounts until after you say I do, because as I said earlier in this video, marriage isn't just a romantic partnership. It's also a financial and a legal partnership. And if you join bank accounts with someone who is not your spouse, that person can potentially take the money that you have put into that account and run with the money without any kind of legal ramifications because you have a joint account. Now, just personally, I do find it a bit weird and backwards that so many couples want joint accounts before they say I do, and after people say I do, they now want separate accounts. I find it backwards, but make sure that you're protected financially and legally in this marriage situation. Now, as you prepare for the financial responsibilities of paying for your wedding, make sure you watch my video on how my wife and I saved on our wedding. Now, the fourth and final thing that you can do to prepare for your marriage, and I'm going to explain it this way. Literally this week, I just made tuition payments for my 3 children. And let me tell you something, kids are very expensive. So the fourth thing you have to do is to discuss a plan about children. So gone are the days when kids were financial assets. Kids nowadays tend to be financial liabilities. Troy, are you really calling your kids liabilities? No, I love my kids, trust me, but they are in fact financial liabilities. So let me just explain. Back in the olden days, whenever that was, people had a lot of kids because these kids can work the farm and they can do a lot in the home, and they just weren't expensive to keep up with. And you needed help around the farm, you needed help around the home. So the more kids you had, the fewer people you had to hire, because you can employ your kids or make them do the things that you could have hired someone else to do. Well, our culture in today's world tends to be a bit different. Whereas most of us don't own farms, we're not having kids to work the land and to have free help around the home. In fact, it's very expensive to feed kids. They eat a lot. You got to pay for food. You got to pay for clothing. My kids are always growing. Literally, I feel like I just bought them clothing 2 months ago, and now they've grown out of that clothing that I just bought. You got to pay for, if you have your kids in private school, you got to pay for tuition, and eventually they'll probably go to college. You're going to want to help them with college. They play sports. Basketball and baseball, and my kids play a lot. Did I mention food? Did I tell you that my kids have eaten me out of house and home almost every single day? Kids are very expensive. So some of the conversations that you're going to want to have before you get married is when to start having children. How many children do you actually want? These are all questions that you have to ask each other. And it doesn't mean that life is going to work out perfectly. Sometimes things happen. Sometimes the plan that you had developed just ain't what you thought it would be. And that's okay. But having a plan is going to be worthwhile for your financial future. And by the way, there's never going to be a great time or a perfect time to start having kids. So you don't want to overplan this. You don't want to have too much of a conversation, but you do want to have some sort of conversation so that you and your spouse can be on the same page as to what you're expecting and what you're planning for the future. And by the way, when those kids are born, you are going to want to make sure that you're preparing for them financially from day one. And I want to remind you that the Blueprint course will give you the tools to start them on their wealthy future track. So just remember that your money as a married couple will go so much further when you make the choice right now to start working together.